guys, so a couple nights ago, we launched a special campaign along with Cheryl McCollum from the Cold Case Research Institute called Love Wins. And what this is it is our answer to all the chaos that's kind of going on right now. The chaos from the riots, the chaos from all the different, pandemic, everything that's happening in our lives right now. Uh, all the issues with the different lost lives that we've had from before the protesting, after the protesting. So all the lost lives that have come out of this, the lost lives of COVID even. And so hashtag love wins is a movement to usher in peace, and knowing that above all, the only way that we're going to get through all of this is loving each other. So what we're actually doing here is we are creating a scholarship fund in remembrance of all the lost lives in 2020 so far, and ushering in peace. And this scholarship fund will go to anyone that wants to go ahead and enter to win. The criteria is really cool. All you have to do is make a 30-second video of yourself and explaining to us how you lead with love. And we are looking for college age students that are, struggling. Maybe they can't get scholarships. Maybe there's a reason, that they aren't available for them, or it's just not enough for them. And so this is our way of helping out. We're hoping to raise about $5,000. If we raise more than that, then we'll look into giving more than one scholarship away. The way that we're doing this is we have some merchandise. It's hashtag love wins merchandise. And there's also lead with love merchandise. They've got shirts, cups, mugs, stickers, anything you could possibly want. And we're going to have it on a couple different platforms. Currently, we're doing some on TeePublic, but I'm working on some on Cafe Press too, because they have a lot more variety of merchandise. And so we'll be donating a portion of the proceeds that we collect on this merchandise to the scholarship fund that we are creating. And then we also have a GoFundMe that will be listed in the show notes of our YouTube show and our podcast. And you guys can click on it and you can donate any amount you'd like. And all of the proceeds from that are going to go ahead and go to the scholarship fund. And we'll be showing you exactly how the money is distributed, how it's collected. We're going to be very transparent with this. We're working with some amazing professionals that from like Cheryl from the Cold Case Institute, Stephen David Lampley from the Oliphant Institute, the leading death investigator, Joseph Scott Morgan. So we're working with all of them to really show how much love wins over everything and bringing peace to a country that we really need it right now. So that's what we're doing. And we're going to go ahead and play our entries at the top of every podcast and every YouTube until we choose a winner. And our special guests that we have each week, the different people that come on and are here with us, Cheryl and Stephen and Joseph, they'll all be a part of choosing that lucky winner or winners, depending on how much we end up getting donated. So I hope that you guys join us in hashtag love wins. And we hope that we get some really great entrants, because we really want to see how you lead with love.
Hey guys, I'm Fancy.
And I'm Colleen.
And this is Murder by Design.
So we have an amazing show planned for you guys tonight. I always love when we get to have Joseph Scott Morgan on. He is such a wealth of information. He's funny. He's great. He's super, super in detailed with the way he explains things so that you can understand. And he was one of the #1 leading death investigators in the country. He helped create the entire rule book for coroners across the country. So we just love when he comes on. And tonight we'll be talking about the autopsy of George Floyd. And he has some great in-depth look at that. He's going to break it down piece by piece, little by little, and explain exactly what we're looking at with these autopsies, both the private autopsy and the one done by the Hennepin County Medical Examiner's Office. So stay tuned. You're really going to enjoy what we have coming up.
Hi, Joseph. Welcome back.
You want to? You guys this evening, yeah.
We're good. Do you want to tell our listeners who you are again? Give them a little reminder.
Hey, yeah. Look, I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and I am a professor in applied forensics at Jacksonville State University in Jacksonville, Alabama. I am a long-time medical legal death investigator. I worked in New Orleans. I started my career there and then finished up my career with the medical examiner's office in Atlanta, Georgia, where I was the senior investigator for a number of years there. I've been in academia now for about 15 years, teaching forensics. I'm a graduate level forensic scientist, and my area of specialty, my area of expertise is in fact medical legal death investigation. And unlike homicide detectives that work for the police, my interest extends far beyond that. It extends to all 5 manners of death, not just one. So I'm just as interested in a suicide as I am in a homicide or an unexplained death or a natural death. I love studying natural pathology because I think that it's fascinating. Pretty much anybody can assess a gunshot wound. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. But natural disease pathology is fascinating to me. And I enjoy working accidental deaths because, you get to see a lot of things that many people never get to see. I've been in the hull of a super tanker where a guy fell 5 stories, through an open hatch. I've been to the tops of some of the largest skyscrapers in the South, to observe things. I've been down in subways. You just get to go and see interesting things and learn all kinds of things.
Well,
and it's a search of knowledge.
My dad is a paralegal, and he used to do some stuff with waste management and then one of the big train companies. So he would always be like, don't you ever walk on the tracks. I've seen people get hit by trains.
I was actually having a conversation with somebody about trains today that is one of the hosts with Law and Crime, and we've been working on the George Floyd case together, and he is a train file, and we were swapping stories about trains. He photographs trains. And I was talking about my experience with trains from a medical legal perspective because I've got enough little boy in me that I love getting up into the cab of a train. And the first time I ever did that, it looks as though it's as complex as like a 747 jet. It's an amazing piece of equipment. And so I was always fascinated by that. But that's the type of thing that you get to do as a medical legal death investigator. And it really whets your appetite, particularly as a scientist, because you're always searching for answers. Not why. Nobody cares about why, because it's the unanswerable question. But when you begin to get into the nuts and bolts of where, when, how, those sorts of things, that's the interesting stuff. That's the fascinating stuff. And plus, why will literally drive you to madness. And so I'm crazy enough as it is. I don't need any assistance in that area. So there you go.
Yeah, I hear you. The why drives all of us insane most of the time.
Yes, it does.
So, and I think that's what we deal with more because of, we're dealing with the living and you're dealing more with the dead. So
we do a lot of speculating.
Right. And, we try to think about what led a person somewhere. And so that's all part of why, So.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. And that's where, and everybody needs a place in this universe. Yeah. Why has never been my place. I do a lot better with how.
Sure.
And that's kind of where I dance. When is a big thing because I'm interested in one of the things that I kind of study and fancy myself, not necessarily an expert in, but an area that I've spent a lot of time, and that's postmortem interval. Trying to understand the length of time that has expired since someone, or has a length of time that has kind of ticked off the clock since someone expired. And that's a big piece of information. If we can ascertain that information, then there's a lot that we can learn about the life that was lived just prior to death, and can kind of frame it maybe a little bit better, and have other people be able to, kind of say whether or not someone's alibi is BS, or if it's true.
Right. And we'll get into that, because later on, most likely we'll split it, but the Scott Peterson case, you guys, I think, are on one side and I'm on the other, but that post-mortem interval of her body and Connor's body before they were found has always been really interesting for me. But you brought up the case that we're going to talk about first, and that's George Floyd. And that case has now sparked a global movement. It's spread, and Black Lives Matter has been going on obviously for decades, and it's kind of in the last 14 years become more, I think, into the public spotlight, especially around 2014. But now there's this, really big push again. And unfortunately, I think almost everybody has seen that video now. And I think that was hard. Usually we don't get to actually see a full-on murder.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever experienced that in my life. That was, that was a very rough 12-minute video to watch, let me tell you. I've seen all kinds of things, but to watch that in real time, like, that was, wow, So, I mean, we're obviously talking about the George Floyd case. I think we're also going to do a little bit about Brionna Taylor as well. Colleen, is that what you wanted to do?
I just kind of wanted to bring her up, and then Ahmaud, just because those are the three. Arbery, yep, those are just three big cases. But mostly talking about Floyd as his autopsies.
Right, and I have those. Grab them.
The topic of issue based on the different coroners. And that's where I'd like to get your opinion on it, since you're in the forensic death investigation. But for the people, if you don't know, George Floyd was a 46-year-old African-American man in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And on May 25th, he was accused of buying cigarettes with a fake $20 bill. And unfortunately, as he was apprehended by 4 police officers, one of them, Derek Chauvin, had his knee on the back of his neck, and others were pinning him down. And for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, he was being essentially asphyxiated. I believe that's kind of what the consensus is for the most part.
Different between the two different autopsies. And I think that's one of the things we'll get into with Joseph. But can you explain what's happening to his body as it's being pinned down like that, Joe?
Yeah, and what the first thing that kind of jumped to mind for me when I saw, because I came into it, unaware of any kind of the physical manifestations he may have been going to, because all I saw was the clip.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what kind of mechanism is going on, and it's going to vary from person to person, dependent upon age, disease, the amount of force, amount of pressure being applied. I only have one perspective on it. I can only see it straight on. But first blush, I'm thinking, well, let's think about the areas from an anatomical position that could have been impacted. First off, we have to ask the question: was there a respiratory compromise as a result of it? Well, I think that if we just look at the position of his knee relative to the organs of the neck, the first thing I would flee to would not be an obstruction of the airway necessarily. However,
Mhm.
we have a large, people at home have to understand that out of all of the organs in the human body, there is none more vascular than the brain. Now, I think that some people might say that the liver would run a close second, but the brain is so heavily dependent upon oxygen uptake and being fed
Well, and
oxygen-rich blood.
if the brain isn't able to work, the other organs don't work. If the other organs don't work, the brain can still work.
Yeah, and so you're going to go into, it's going to compromise. Literally, it can lead, I don't want to say a multi-system failure, but the major systems are going to be compromised. Obviously, the respiratory system will be impacted, cardiovascular will be impacted, and then, it kind of goes down the line from there.
I think GI is last.
Yeah, it probably would be. And, that's, in the acute phase, one of the things I'd be curious about would be anoxia, which is essentially deprivation of oxygen to the brain. And we have these two kind of bilateral major vessels that are running parallel to the trachea. And literally, folks at home can kind of get an idea. I'll retract my neck a little bit. And right here, where the larynx is, these vessels are going to run north and south, if you will, just for layman's terms, north and south in this area, and those are the carotid vessels. And people have heard of the jugular or jugular veins. Some people, potato. Those are venous returns. Okay, so you're thinking about unoxygenated blood or dirty blood. Some people will say that. It's kind of a misnomer, but just for bright red blood going to the brain. Yeah, and then it has to be cleaned. Okay. So the brain is screaming out, I need oxygen, I need oxygen. Well, I think that probably when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, well, yeah, it could be impinged at this point. You can create that kind of pressure. Then we've got the cardiovascular or the vascular covered. We talked about the airway. The other thing that we'd want to know, I think, in assessing this is to see if he was neurocompromised, because we're talking about the structures in the neck. And so when you get into these areas, we begin to think about the cervical vertebra. Has anything occurred that could impact his motor function? Like, has this area in C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, have these been compromised in any way? Have they impacted the spinal cord? Then we've kind of got this, these things that kind of stretch out into not esoterica, but they're peripherally associated. So let's just say that we've got somebody that is pathologically compromised, disease compromised in some way. We've got somebody that has heart disease. We've got somebody that's got maybe COPD. We've got somebody that has something else going on, an underlying condition, or as we've learned this damn term, everybody in the world, a comorbidity. And this factors into this, and you look at all, and you can't just focus on one thing. Not in this case. It's a slippery slope. So you have to look at the totality of everything. And so then we have to consider, and I'm just trying to explain how a medical examiner will think about this.
Sure.
They're going to think about what's going on in what we refer to as in the gross sense. And I don't mean like, ooh, gross. I mean like gross, like total. How do you observe it in totality, the organ intact or the organ system intact? What can you see, as pathologists refer to this term, and let this stick with you, called what can I see with the unaided eye?
Right.
So that's just the gross features, all right? Then you get into histological samples. And actually, it's detailed out in Mr. Floyd's autopsy report. And that means that when we find an area at autopsy, say we're talking about like the vessels in the heart, we're going to take a cross-section of that vessel at the heart. We'll take a cross-section of the lung, the brain, the whole 9 yards. And I'm going to go into detail with you guys just so you understand what's involved in an in-custody autopsy, because it's unlike any other kind of autopsy. I'm going to get very graphic I'm going to tell you
Okay.
specifically what he would have gone through at this autopsy, just so the general public understands.
Now, is that going to be different than what's in the one-page autopsy from Dr. Baden? So that's going to be different, right? Because that's not in custody, right? So totally different.
Well, I have to say, what I don't know if it's, I think I did forward that to you.
Mm-hmm.
That is coming through the filter of an attorney. So I can't say that is Baden's autopsy report.
Right.
Crump, I think is his name, Benjamin
Yeah.
Crump, who I've been on air with before. He's taken the document, or he has taken down notes from Dr. Baden.
Yeah.
Dr. Baden has told him, this is what I found, but it's not an official autopsy report. I don't have access to that, and I doubt that any of us will have access to that, and I can get off into that as well.
Sure, I'd love to hear about that. And
sure. I'm more than happy to address all of it.
But that can be the difference in why the two are the way they are, as well as what you're saying, is because they're not done in the same situation as well.
And we can go down that road, and I can talk about that a little bit
Sure.
because I've been involved in private autopsies, and I can kind of tell you the way they work, and because a lot of people don't understand, a lot of the stuff relative to it. So anyway, when we've got the microscopic findings. That is when we take a piece of the heart and you slice it very thinly. The histologist is going to take that sample and they're going to stain it. They stain it with a particular, for lack of, it's a contrast, it's kind of a dye, and that particular dye will make this thing pop on the microscopic slide, because when you're looking at these tissues through the microscope, you're looking at these slides through the microscope, there's certain things you can't appreciate if you just take a piece of tissue, fix it to a slide, and take a look at it. So you have to stain it, and they call it staining. And so things will jump out. They have certain stains that react with certain types of disease.
Sure.
Like when you think about things like atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, they just kind of stand out. So we look at it histologically, and I have to say I was shocked by the fact that in the Hennepin County ME's report, their histo report came out really, really quickly. People go on and on about tox. Histo takes at least as long many times as tox does, because it's not something you can just turn around overnight.
Right.
Okay. So,
and how quickly did they have it out?
It was within a week, I think.
Because it only happened like 9 days ago.
Yeah, all this stuff came out in a week. And the saving grace is, what I know of Hennepin County, first off, they're a really good agency. I've had several friends that have worked there over the years. They do their toxicology in-house. So if you go to certain states and you work at a medical examiner's office, even like in Atlanta, we were at the mercy of the GBI. So if you drew samples at autopsy, that stuff literally had to be transported an hour away and then put into their system.
And then sent back.
Hennepin's not handcuffed that way. They literally can say, go see what the boys upstairs have to say about this. And they take everything and they run it upstairs, and then they'll start doing their testing. And all of these offices do, if you look, and anybody can see his report. All right. And I will send you guys the link from the Long Crime Network, and it has the report embedded in it. I think you can probably get it from other sources.
The 20-page one? Yeah, I got it.
Oh, God.
Are you okay? Technical difficulties.
But that way we can put it in the link, so people, if you are interested in looking at it.
Yep.
Hey, guys, did you lose me?
No, we can hear you.
Can you see me, though?
No.
There you go.
There you go. That's good.
Down a little bit.
Oh, no, down just a little bit more. There you go.
Hang on.
There, yes.
Yes.
I can't see me, so.
We can see you.
And that bugs
me.
So.
Yeah, that's why I keep looking down, because my computer today is down here.
Gotcha.
So.
Oh, Lord have mercy. I'm so afraid of this thing. Okay, anyway.
So, we have the 20-page report, so.
Okay, good. And I'm more than happy to send you that link. And, anybody can download this thing at any rate.
Right.
Okay, so I was surprised at the speed at which this thing came out. I was very surprised at the speed at which not just qualitative but quantitative toxicology results came out, because lots of times you will get qualitative things, like we've got THC, we've got opiates, we've got, I don't know, we've got benzo, we've got cocaine metabolite. It'll say it's there, but you won't get hard numbers. And many times that takes time. Many people don't understand the guts of that, how it works, but you're at the mercy many times of these labs. Shortening this, the fact that they're capable of doing this in-house is a big deal. And so they were able to turn this thing around.
Because they've got...
Knowing what I know about these organizations, they've been burning the midnight oil on this case.
Yeah.
And this case has gotten special treatment.
Yeah.
And it's the way it is. I can hear family members out there right now, that are upset, have other deaths, that they've worked with, and they've been told over and over again, well, we're pending. And this will be something that will haunt them for a while, but that's neither here nor there. So yeah, I was very impressed with the speed at which this came out at. And now, before I go any further, do you guys have specific questions? Because I have quite a bit to say about this relative to, and I don't want to get off, I can't, because it's not my area. I'm not going to get off into the weeds about the sociology of any of this and all of that stuff. That's
not your medic.
You're right. Well, that's not. Yeah. We talked with Cheryl about that, and we'll talk with Stephen about that some. But that's not what we wanted to go through this with you. Because this is something that we don't know. I can look at these numbers, and I'm sure Colleen knows some of them, understanding them based on being a nurse. But like you were saying, you normally don't see this out of a quick report, the numbers. But I mean, they are very detailed. It's not just like you said. It's not just like, oh, there was fentanyl, but I don't know, and there was this. But they're very specific. And
they are. And listen, this is. I say this in the affirmative. This is a complete autopsy report. They're waiting on nothing else. They have all of the information, and hear me correctly, they have all of the information that the Hennepin County DA's office is going to get from the medical examiner's office in order to move forward with a case from a medical legal standpoint. I can't say what interviews are going to reveal or anything like that, but ME is at the end of the road at this point. And so they've covered everything from the Hennepin County ME perspective. Now, there's going to be a lot of eyes on this report. There'll be people poring over this thing, and the ME will come, and they will be asked very hard questions when this goes to trial. I promise you, they will. Very hard, because if you think for 2 seconds that the defense attorneys that are going to be representing these police officers are just going to lay down and not ask hard questions, you can forget it. This is not going to be a walk in the park. They're going to ask very specific questions about what is and is not there.
Right.
And that is key. Because do you want me to continue with the statement?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Because Michael Biden is saying that there are things that are there, and the Hennepin County ME's office is stating in the affirmative that they are not seeing the same thing that Michael Biden is seeing. Now, I want you to let that sink in and just hear what I'm saying. Now, it doesn't mean that the Hennepin County is wrong. It doesn't mean that Biden is wrong. But what I'm saying is that Biden is seeing things that the Hennepin County ME did not see. Now,
is there a reason for that?
Biden does not represent the prosecutor.
Right.
He does not represent the defense. He's on an island.
Independent.
He's working for Benjamin Crump. Okay.
Yes.
Now, de facto, they'll say he's working for the family, okay? Just like he worked for Michael Brown's family. Now, with that said, we don't have a complete report from Dr. Bodden, and I await that report. I'd like to see what else it says. But right now, he's saying that apparently that, and Michael's a very good forensic pathologist, Dr.
Sure.
Bodden. I'll show him as much respect as possible. He's a very good forensic pathologist and has been involved in many high-profile cases. But we have to understand that he's not going to be part of the criminal trial. In no way. He is not going to be a part of it. I think that people hear this and they think, yeah, well, Michael Bodden is going to be part of this. No, he's not. He's going to be part of civil action, more than likely, I would imagine, because that's what Benjamin Crump does. And that's the direction this is going on. So you're going to have these kind of parallel events taking place moving forward. There will be a civil trial. Now, I don't know at what pace that will occur. I think that it was probably wise on the part of the family to retain Dr. Bodden early and get to Mr. Floyd's body early, so that it's wise, because you don't have to do an exhumation.
Yeah.
Everything is fresh, and I mean that in a literal sense.
Embalming and all.
Right. And so, and my suspicion is, and I cannot verify this, my suspicion is the examination was by Dr. Bodden was probably done at a funeral home, the funeral home that the family chose, whoever it was, for Mr. Floyd's services. And Bodden would have gone in to view a body that had already been significantly dissected.
Sure.
Now, when I say that, the dissection is unlike anything that most people can imagine, even for the most hardy of people that have seen autopsies over the years. The things that we have to do, I don't have to do them anymore, but my colleagues have to do in the medical legal field relative to in-custody deaths. And let me tell you what an in-custody death is. Any death that the police have control over an individual, whether it be in the back of a patrol car, whether it be an arrest where somebody dies as a result of that, or if they die while physically in custody at a jail.
Yeah.
Those are all in custody deaths. Now, you say, well, Morgan, how does this vary from what we see on television and all these things that we've filled our brains with over the years? Well, first, there is an extensive external examination that is done, okay? I mean, from stem to stern, every inch of his body will be examined, or any inch of anybody's body that is in custody will be examined. And they will even go so far as, and I can't say that they did this in this case, but I've been present for cases where individuals have died in custody. We would take a scalpel and completely shave the head. Completely shave the head if there was any hair there. We're going to remove a lot of the hair, as a matter of fact, throughout the body. We're going to look at them. We're going to do AP and lateral x-rays. That means straight on, okay? Bring a portable x-ray machine, shoot straight down, and then lateral, shoot them, do kind of a cross-section, well, not a cross-section, but a lateral view, right, so that we can see from back to front, okay, and not just looking down. Hang on one second. I'm getting pinged here. And this has been going on literally all day long. I'm running on fumes right now, so I'm sorry.
I'm sure you are. It's okay.
Anyway, let me mute this. I apologize, ladies.
No, you're all right.
You're fine.
We've been there.
So when they do this autopsy, what will happen is that there will be and some doctors do it in reverse. They will not open the front of the body first. They will not do the standard Y incision to begin with, which goes
Mhm.
from the apex of the shoulders
Right.
to the center of the sternum, all the way
Mhm.
down to the pubis, and you open the body up, and then you open the head.
Mhm.
Many times this will be flipped, and literally the body is flipped. The body goes from supine, which means laying on the body on the back. The body will then be placed in a prone position, so the body is face down. Now, I want this to sink in so that people understand how thorough this is. At that point in time, the scalpel will be applied to the back of the head. And if people at home will kind of touch the crown of their head back here and imagine that the body, the skin on your body is a big zipped up suit and it zipped up the back. Imagine that the zipper line goes down the midline of your back from the top of your head. And that incision is made from the crown of the head all the way down the spine. Okay. And it goes down to roughly the coccyx. And there will be lateral incisions that are made. And literally the skin is peeled back off of the back of the neck, off the back of the head. So that when you look down the long axis of that body, you can appreciate all the muscle groups posteriorly to see if there's any hemorrhage. And this is done to see if anybody's been beaten.
Yep.
Dissect the backs of the arms, running up the arms, the forearms, dissect the palms of the hands, the backs of the hands, dissect the legs, the backs of the legs, all the way down. And this always makes me cringe, even though I've done it. You dissect the soles of the feet.
Yeah.
And you open them up to see. Now, I've been involved also in autopsies of individuals. People say, I don't understand why you do this. We do it because of one word: lawyers. Because every case, an in custody case, is the potential for some kind of civil litigation.
Right.
Somebody is going to complain. Somebody's going to imply something.
Mhm.
So you have to be as thorough as possible. That's why I am trying to say that in the case of George Floyd, I can tell you that the people at Hennepin County would have gone to great lengths in this dissection. And this is standard procedure for any kind of in custody death. Then you flip the individual over, then you open up the body on the anterior aspect, and you go through all the organ systems. And they even, in the autopsy report, they talk about, I think it was the neck, they did a layer by layer dissection of the neck,
Mhm.
and it's detailed in the report.
It
And
is.
that means that they go through the skin, all the muscle groups, and they're literally peeling it back bit by bit, because there are things grossly you will miss. I've been present when they have missed. You're not going to get everything. It is an empirical impossibility to see everything that you need to see that is going to satisfy all parties involved.
Now let
So,
me ask real quick though,
yeah,
because
sure.
this is actually something that came up tonight that I had not thought of. And people, you've got your conspiracy theorists out there that have all kinds of crazy different things. And one of the things is they ended up having a closed casket, where they had said they were going to have an open casket, but they've had a closed casket, which has been, now people are saying, oh, he's not in there, da 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 da, all these different things, right? Could that have been the reasoning why they had the closed casket? Because
Yes.
this
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
custody autopsy is different than even what you're going to see in just a regular even murder case. Yes.
Yes.
Right, because
Okay.
they're going to stitch up a body
There we go.
after the case if they are even with all those layers. I know it does get difficult, like when it's just the Y, it's still massive.
Sure.
Yeah,
stitch.
even with an individual, and I don't know, what do you ladies call these things? I always try to explain what the incision looks like. My wife has them, the hair bands that go over the head that look like a rainbow. They go. What do you,
Oh,
do you
yeah.
call those hair bands? You push your hair back and put this
Headband.
thing.
Headband.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
A headband.
Headband.
Yeah.
Okay,
Headband.
just
Yeah.
imagine that. That's what the incision looks like in a standard incision on the scalp at autopsy. So we make the incision posterior of the ear right here. It goes here and makes a big rainbow over the top of the head, and that way you can take the scalp and reflect it forward, and you can reflect it back, and the skull is completely
Bare.
viewable at that point. And then you have to take off the temporalis muscles, and then you can get the striker saw, the high-speed saw that you hear sounds like a cat saw. Yeah, exactly. And that's what we use to open the skull so that we can take a look at the brain. Even that, and I've been present for funerals of people I've had. God help me, unfortunately, I've had police officer friends that were shot and killed in the line of duty. I've gone to their autopsy. I've haven't gone to their autopsies. I've gone to their funerals, and I know that they've been autopsied. And you can't tell it. First off, they use these extra soft pillows in the casket, and they're, the pillow kind of surrounds the head, so you can't see that. Would the things that would the dissections that would have taken place with Mr. Floyd? We're just talking about Hennepin County now.
Mm-hmm.
Hang on now, because who else got the body after Hennepin County? Well,
right.
Dr. Bodden got the body after Hennepin County. I don't know what else he did. I don't know. I don't know that we'll ever know, because I don't know if we'll see an autopsy report. All I have is what I sent you guys that, that Mr. Crump tweeted out from his website or from his Twitter. That's all I have.
I mean, and
so I don't know
Mr.
how
Crump.
detailed that is. I don't know what other further dissections Dr. Bodden may have done, but I do know that based on the extensive examination that Hennepin County conducted, he does not allude to any hemorrhage in the cervical spine. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't allude to any kind of hemorrhage adjacent specifically to the right carotid artery. However, Dr. Bodden does. He talks about that he's noticing focal areas of hemorrhage, and I can't remember what it said in Crump's tweet, but it was like, repeat it back if you have it in front of you. It's like C3, 4, or 5. I can't recall.
He says condition of the body included hemorrhage over the vertebral bodies and in the cervical region was found. Hemorrhage on the outside of the carotid artery at the level of C3, C4, C5 was found. Hemorrhage in wrists and forearms was found. Lungs not congested or infected. No issue with the liver, spleen, intestines, or kidneys. Now that's the condition of the body that he tweeted out. There's more going down.
And so first off, the carotids are right here, and so what he's talking about, that there was a focal area of hemorrhage that he's picked up on in this. Now I don't know if that's something that Hennepin County missed. I don't know, but they don't make note of it. And for me, when you're talking about an in custody death, and just let me frame this so that people understand, and this is just my little slice of pie.
Right.
It doesn't mean that it's worth the gunpowder to blow it to hell, but this is the way I look at it. If you're conducting an investigation, negative findings are just as important as positive findings. Sure. If you're talking about a neck, I want to hear you say, I've examined cervical vertebra. I don't see any signs of fracturing or trauma or anything in here. If you're thinking that this is a police in custody death, I want to know about the carotid arteries. I want to know if you dissected the carotid arteries. You're saying that he's got atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. Well, athero can extend up the carotids. We have people that deal with it day in and day out. Hospitals are full of them.
Yeah.
I want to know if those vessels are patent. I want to know if they're open, at least. And that's absent relative to, I'm not even talking about trauma. I mean, there's nothing that's mentioned about that. And that's a glaring absence. Now, what they do talk about are these abraded areas on the wrist. We know what that's from. That's from restraints. That's right. But Hennepin mentions more about other associated trauma than Bodden does in the report that was dropped from I never can remember his name. I want to say it's Crump.
It's Crump, not Trump. It's Crump.
It's not Grump. It's not Grump either. So So it's just the lawyer. It came from the lawyer, and so I think about that, and then I've thought about how Bodden was able to see this, and the people at Hennepin did not, and I don't know why there's that disconnect. I think that's a question a lot of people are going to be asking, moving forward. And
what exactly does the differentiation, what does it mean? I mean, so with what the Hennepin is showing to what Bauden is saying there, what makes that different and why is that important?
What he is implying, at least according to the attorney, is that Mr. Floyd died directly, with no contributing factors, directly to that carotid vessel being compressed. Look no further. That's what he's saying. Hennepin County is saying that this is a homicide. They classified the manner.
Sure.
They're saying that all of the restraint stuff had something to do with it, but the monster in the room was the underlying natural disease. That still doesn't mean that it's not a homicide. You know, and I can't recall if I've talked to you about these cases or not, but there are other cases that are out there in the literature where people have brought about the deaths of people that the person died of some kind of natural disease pathology, but you have to ask your question. You have to ask the question, you know, if those two individuals had not intersected at that point in time, would that individual still be with us? In my estimation, Mr. Floyd would still be present with us had he not intersected with them and have been treated in this manner. Now,
sure.
Do I think that they could have treated him in another manner and he survived? Yeah. I think that's completely plausible. Now, the one other thing that everybody is fleeing from in this set of circumstances, I've kind of picked up on, and there's actually a news article about this, that one of the police officers actually said to Chauvin, you know, why do you have him in that position? This might result in excited delirium. And he made that statement on the scene, and I'll send you that link and you can post it up for your viewers. And if you're not familiar with excited delirium, some people say it's a real thing, some people say it's not. It was first identified in like 1850. It was called Bell's hysteria. There's a variety of different names. It's kind of like when people say shell shock, you know, it's PTSD. It's evolved from that point in time. And that is that some people, let's see, now Colleen will certainly be able to address this. You have people that will present with catatonia, sometimes which they become very rigid like this. And this will give the impression that they're non-compliant. And it all hinges on, in the modern context, of people coming in contact with police. There's generally underlying drugs. They're terrified of being restrained. And keep in mind, what did Mr. Floyd say? He didn't only call out for his mother. He said what? He said, I have claustrophobia. Well, I do too. All right. I have claustrophobia. You know, I've got agoraphobia, you know, not that anybody wants to know that, but I do as a result of stuff in my life.
Sure.
And so I know what it means to be pinned into an area. And I can imagine myself succumbing to pressure that's being placed on my neck and my hands are restrained. I can think about that and I can say, hey, you know what? I could see myself having some kind of cardiac event, certainly passing out, if I'm in fear for my life and I'm afraid because I have these underlying problems, this underlying, maybe it's not a physical pathology, but it's certainly a psychopathology. Then if you have any kind of substances in your system, which you can't ignore the fact that he does. I'm sorry. I mean, that's just reality.
He did.
It in no way means that he deserves what happened to him. But all of these things are part and parcel of a bigger picture.
Right.
And
when you're looking at a medical examiner versus a private autopsy, I mean, things are going to come into different reasonings of what they're looking for.
Well, and it's going to play into the fact of, you know, prosecutors versus defense and, you know, their motives and XYZ in the trial. But in terms of directly his, you know, the autopsy, his death, what the causes are, it's not, well, you can't, you know, he may have been on drugs or a history of drugs, but that's not why he died. And there a lot of feelings are obviously brought up right now.
But what I can understand.
Right. I'm saying that like there are people who are going to be that doesn't have a factor, like that's what they're going to be thinking, but and that's why people are hating on the county coroner,
right,
for what he said, and then then they see the private autopsy page and they're like, well, they must have done something wrong. Who cares if he has heart disease? That's not why he died. And so, and there are a lot of like outside people's feelings about what happened, especially since we watched it happen. And so
and that was the very hard part about it. But let me tell you another player that's going to enter onto the stage here that we haven't talked about yet. There will be another consulting forensic pathologist. I would bet the farm on it. That is going to show up, and they're going to be working for the defense. So now you've got the battle of 3 forensic pathologists.
Right.
Okay. The thing about it is this: Dr. Bodden and Mr.
Crump.
Thank you. They don't have any skin in the game when it comes to the criminal aspect of this.
Yeah.
They got a lot riding on the civil aspect of it. They don't have any skin in it when it comes to the prosecution, except. And I think that this is a stroke, perhaps, of genius. I was appearing with Nancy Grace last week, and she was talking about how the charges needed to be elevated.
And they were.
I'm not a lawyer, but I kind of saw this coming.
Yeah.
Because Bodden was injected into the circumstance and he made his assessment. Now you've got something that is moved from third degree homicide, which I gotta be honest with you, I ain't never heard of third degree homicide. And the thing about it, it's called a variety of things in different states,
manslaughter.
But we won't get into that because I'm not a lawyer. You can talk to somebody else about that. But
it speaks to intention or non-intention, basically.
Yeah, and there's no intent. I did read the statute. There's no intent implied in third degree.
Right.
But with the second degree, you're going to have specific intent. Now, the prosecution, they've charged them. But just because they charged them doesn't mean they have conviction. They got to prove it. And the burden rests upon them. The thing that the defense is really going to have to get past is that damn videotape.
Yeah.
Because I got to tell you, when you see that man applying direct pressure to that other man's neck over the course of, how long was it? I mean,
8 minutes and 46 seconds.
It was almost at 9 minutes.
Yeah.
Listen, most people will lose conscience.
Well, he did there for like 3 minutes of it. He was unconscious.
And I don't know that, Colleen, I don't even know if he was still with us at that point.
Well,
it was, no. It was a minute and something. I read it.
I thought it was like 3 minutes and 45 seconds or something. It was a long time. And
but at the end, I don't know that he even had agonal respirations there. I think that they just removed him from the scene and started working him. And I'm doing this blind because I don't even know. I haven't seen any kind of EKG tape on this guy. Any kind of assessment. I don't know what they found in the back of the ambulance. Let me dispel another myth that's floating around as well. There's all kinds of conspiracy people that are floating this idea that cops got out of the back of that ambulance, and those were not police officers that got out of the back of the damn ambulance. Those were EMTs. If people will just take the time to go do a little Google search and look at the uniforms that are worn by Hennepin County, the Hennepin County EMS, they will see that their uniforms are a tan shirt and brown pants. Now, granted, they're similar to what county sheriffs wear, but that's what their EMTs were.
Well,
I've had at least 2 people say to me, "Oh my God, well, cops jumped out of the ambulance and cops put him in and didn't try to do anything for him."
Well, okay, so
that's
I know where
inaccurate.
this is. I kind of know where it's coming from. They were wearing full vests that were, Kevlar vests. So they had the vests on, which generally an EMT is not going to have. So that's why people were saying that. And then when you see the video at the end, when they flop him up onto the gurney, they don't strap him down before they start moving him, and they don't check for any pulse or do any type of life-saving measures, which is where these people are getting this idea. And I can understand it. I get where they're coming from. But like you're saying, if you look at the actual EMT, uniform, then that can kind of dispel that. But I think they're more focusing on that fact that nothing was done.
Yeah, there was one person that really focused on the vest that the guy was wearing.
Sure.
And I'm thinking, well, how long has it been since you've left the house? Have you seen the world that EMTs inhabit? And if you look carefully at them, they're not armed, but they're wearing a vest so that they don't get shot, because EMTs get shot.
Yes, they do.
And it's a horrible, very tough. It's probably one of the most unsung jobs on the face of the planet. That is terrible. They do terrible job things to have to do. I would not want to be an EMT for all the gold in California. It's just not something that I would want to do, because the
pediatric ones are the ones that I'm just like, I can't believe. And they get in the Flight for Life helicopters. Like, I worked at Children's, so I got to see our EMTs all the time. And they're like the best team of, like, they're a doctor, they're an anesthesiologist, they're a nurse, respiratory therapist, they're everything.
Yep.
And they are quick.
They are.
So I think when people they look at like the end of that video, they see him, maybe they're not doing these emergency measures. They probably already knew what was happening, and they knew that there was a camera. And I think that there was probably, the quick, let's get him out of here close the door. Mm-hmm. Let's work on him.
Well, I'm sure it had already been called in as dead on scene by one of the other officers. I mean, it's you can determine it before you take the wrist pulse, or he's peed himself. He's not responsive. He's dead on scene. Please hurry. Whatever. So I can understand that, and I'm loving that you're dispelling some of these things, because I think there are things that people that don't know exactly the world that we all deal in, on a regular basis. They see a crime show or a true crime show, and they think that that's got to be the answers, right? And they're not.
Well, I think, and I think that another thing that, that I kind of take personal with it is the fact that this is a hard enough situation.
Yes.
It's a horrible situation to begin with.
Yes.
You're telling me you have to pile something else on top of it to make it even appear to be worse than it already is. And we've gone pretty damn far down that road in making this as pretty much as bad as it can be. And now you want to say that these EMTs are some kind of agents of evil. And it's just, it's not a good look. It's something that people just need to step back just for a second and kind of let things simmer down and kind of get our mindset here, because there's a lot of work to be done moving forward in all areas, relative to how this investigation is going to play out.
Well, and that's one of the things that we talked with Cheryl the other night, in fact, of people being very critical that the other 3 officers were not arrested and charged immediately. And she was explaining, okay, look, here is the situation with that. And again, with what Nancy Grace is saying, that they should have elevated his, Chauvin's, charge. And they did. They've taken it to 2nd degree. Do I think it'll go to 1st? Probably not, because I don't think that they're going to get that deliberation, which is the difference usually between 1st and 2nd, is the actual deliberation, which is something we heard over and over and over again in our Gypsy trial. And Nick's trial was deliberation. And that was the difference, But I think that people didn't understand that, yes, absolutely, there was not a world that we live in that those 3 officers were not getting charged. There was not. But we had to be, they had to be careful. in what charges they brought. They needed to know exactly what they had in this autopsy, in this 20-page autopsy, what they could prove, what they knew, and they had to look at that footage, I'm sure more times than any of us will ever want to look at it, to determine what it was exactly that they could get those other 3 cops, for.
And witness statements, other camera footage,
union reps,
right,
I
they had to
mean.
do a lot. And so what Cheryl had said was, if they're going to do it, they have to do it right, because you don't want it to get thrown out later.
No,
Right.
you don't. And you want to make sure that all
This is done
all
right.
of your I's are dotted and all your T's are crossed.
Right.
And this is one of the things that I found really curious. And I know why they did it. They had to, because people were lighting torches and picking up pitchforks. They had to charge this guy. It felt to me like they charged him really, really quickly. I was surprised that they didn't at least wait another day or two, so that now, and this has created a problem for them going forward, and it will be brought up again. Okay, well, you charged him with 3rd degree. Now after a few days later, you're charging him with
changed?
2nd. What's your motivation behind that?
Is that because of the people? And
that's going to be brought up in court. And I can tell you, his defense attorneys are going to be brought up. Listen, nobody wins in this situation. Nobody. And it's not a win-lose kind of thing.
No, it's
everybody's going to feel
tragedy.
pain. Everybody's going to feel pain over it moving forward. Most prosecutors don't like to prosecute cops. The reality is that this cop's going to be prosecuted. All these cops are going to be prosecuted. Now, how good a job are you capable of doing remains to be seen. And that's not the area in which I dance. The question for me is how effective is the forensic pathologist going to be able to go in? And we talk about this all the time, and it's kind of passe. People in my field have this, they love to say this, I speak for those who can no longer speak for themselves.
Right.
Well, that might be all fine and good, but baby, let me tell you something. When rubber hits the road in this trial, he is literally going to have to speak on behalf of George Floyd and talk about what these findings are. He found, physically with him at the scene, and explain it. I think one of the questions is going to be, I'm going to be very interested to see if there is going to be an entanglement relative to the information that the prosecutor is going to have to contend with what Dr. Bodden has said, because it's going to be in the news. They'll be standing on court. I can see it right now. There's going to be cameras in front of the courthouses. People are going to be making speeches on the front, and they're going to, I'm really wondering if this is going to come up in pretrial. I think that it probably will. I just don't know what degree and in what manner at this point in time, because all of this is so fresh. But it'll be interesting to watch this develop, moving forward, because it's something that, I'm very happy as a medical legal guy that the family went ahead and retained Dr. Bodden and brought his expertise to bear. But, most swords have 2 edges. Yeah. And so it's going to be interesting to see if this is going to play for the defense, or is the defense going to raise the question, well, you had this outside forensic pathologist come in and take a look at the work of the people that are employed by you and the county that are doing an ineffective job.
Yeah,
I've got a forensic pathologist over here. My guy's going to come in. He's going to say all of this is nonsense.
Yep.
So, you have to be prepared, and it's not play school.
I think it's
you have to be prepared.
Interesting, because it's going to almost be impossible for them to find an impartial jury. It's straight up, the world knows. You couldn't even bring somebody from England to come here. They know. And the other part is, I'm curious on if they're going to be willing to settle.
Well, I mean, that's settling is
You talking about
different.
from a civil standpoint, or
Either way.
oh?
No. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking that, with the second degree charge, because this is, even if you swung for the fence with second degree charge right out of the gate,
Mm-hmm.
you leave room to plead down at that point in
You
time.
do.
Now the DA has pushed all the chips in. They might, if they can't get a conviction on murder 2 or whatever, I can't figure out what in the hell they call anything, but the new charge, second degree,
Mm-hmm.
if they've pushed all their chips in on it, how are they going to look if they try to plead it back down to third?
Yeah. It's
And that's something to think about. Now, if you'd done this right out of the gate, and I hate the Monday morning quarterback people, but listen, this is glaring to me. Why
It is to me.
Why didn't you just do it from Jump Street?
Well, then I have another question, and maybe this is just me being ignorant, but now when you say that there's going to be a third pathologist that gets involved in this for the defense side, I understand that. There's always going to be their side and the other side. I get that. But they've already released the body. So what does that third pathologist, where does he come in? What does he have to do? Does he have to go off what the Hennepin County has founded? Or does he somehow get some, how does he make his determination?
Well, I've spent a lot of time, at the, when you're working in the medical legal field, it wasn't my job to pass judgment on whether or not somebody got caught, somebody got convicted. As a
Sure.
dad,
Right.
as a private citizen, I want to see bad guys go to jail. All right, period.
Yeah.
But from a professional perspective, I treated defense attorneys just like I did prosecution when they came to our office to review stuff. And I would sit down and I'd talk with them. And I was friendly with defense attorneys, just like I was friendly with prosecutors.
Right.
I don't have a dog in the fight.
Because you don't have a dog in that fight. Right, exactly.
I don't. And so,
exactly.
But this is what's going to happen. The defense will go to the Hennepin County Medical Examiner's office. They will sit down. They are going to look at every bit of data that the Hennepin, they will bring their forensic pathologist in, and they're going to get charged $400 per hour by this guy or gal, and they're going to sit down, they're going to review it, and they're going to draw up a report. They're going to look at, remember the histo slides I was talking about? They're going to take a look at all of those. They're going to take a look at all of the pre-autopsy photographs. They're going to take a look at the post-mortem x-rays. They're going to take a look at all of the autopsy photography, which is going to be extensive. They're going to take a look at all of the data that they gleaned in the emergency room. It was standard for us to subpoena everything from, we had in Atlanta, we had Grady. In New Orleans, we had Charity. So if anybody rolled into either one of those big general public hospitals like that, we had a standing agreement, we called it kind of a weird term. It was an open subpoena. We'd go in, and if we had data that we needed to glean from treatment, like in the emergency room, we'd go and have them make copies of those reports. We'd take them back over, and the forensic pathologists and investigators would review the stuff before we actually autopsy. That stuff's in the file at Hennepin County. So everything. And so that means that if it's in the ME's file in Hennepin County, in discovery, the defense will have access to all that. And you're right, the body is gone at this point.
Right, so they're not going to physically touch him, but they'll have everything.
No, but let me tell you what they will have, Colleen. Those tissue samples.
Yeah, the slides.
The slides, but not just the slides. They have taken all of those tissue samples and heat seal those. And we used to use, if you've ever seen some people call it a Cool Whip cup, but it looked more like a bait cup, like you put worms in. They were white with a white lid.
Yeah.
You put formalin in it, and the tissue turns into almost like a hardened rubber. That's sitting on a shelf somewhere there too. If
so
they
they'll have access
to that,
to
then the private pathologist will cut their own slides in.
Right, I was going to say they can cut their own dissection piece out
of it.
They will,
and particularly now, hey, we go back to Dr. Bodden. He has stated that he found hemorrhage. Okay, well, hopefully in this area where hemorrhage was observed by him, which is going to be in this area right through here, adjacent, and
Mhm.
it's very internal. He's talking about adjacent to the vertebral bodies and the carotid that's running through there. Hopefully this was dissected out at autopsy and they took a sample of that tissue.
Yeah.
If they did, it's going to be floating in that mishmash that's in that cup, and that pathologist will take it out. They might grossly examine that tissue, or they might cut their own slides in.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's a lot riding on this. And not
Yes.
only might you have an additional forensic pathologist, but now you've charged 3 other people.
Yeah.
To their own
just for a
defense.
second.
To their own
And
defense.
these are going to be
Jesus.
potentially 3 separate trials, or
Mhm.
4
4.
separate trials.
Yeah.
And
And well, and
Gracious.
so I had just thought, so besides just this criminal aspect, but is there the potential that the ACLU, does for the civil trial, would they retain a forensic examiner on that sense, not in like a criminal standpoint, but just
Well, that
to
would be
show-
Bauden. That would be Bauden, wouldn't it? Because that's the family retained them.
well, from the ACLU, perhaps, but that's going to be in a civil matter. But there's another
Right.
group of people that we haven't even touched on yet.
Yeah.
We
There's
haven't
so
even
many.
No, we haven't even mentioned the feds yet, because they're going to do a
the
civil
feds are
rights
gonna do it.
investigation,
Yep.
and that's
Mhm.
going to be a separate trial.
Right.
It would not be surprising at all that the feds are going to bring federal charges against this police officer and the other police officers for violations of
civil rights.
of civil rights.
Mhm.
Then this resets again, and they're going to have to
God.
retain experts in that too.
Yeah.
And our
That's why I'm
forensic
wondering if there's going
pathologists-
to be some pleas or some settlements, because I don't know if there's so many trials that are going to happen. If it's
I don't know. Okay, but I don't think cost effective is going to come into play here, because what's going to come into play. Okay, no, it would save face for the defendants. I don't think that your DA or your federal prosecuting attorneys are going to see it the same way, because at this point, all eyes are on them to make this right. And if they don't, Colleen, we're going to continue to have this chaos that is being created right now.
But if they don't have enough to prove it, and they don't get a conviction,
Yeah, well,
and
but I don't
then
think
they're screwed, because then they can't retry it.
Yeah, but I think they've got enough to prove it. They're like Joseph said, at very least, they're going to have a really hard time getting over that video, because that's going to seal a deal no matter what. That's done.
Yeah, and I can predict that over the next 2 years probably, we will see that video played over and over and over again. That's the way the media works.
Yeah.
And that's just what they do.
Yeah.
Because that's the nature of the media.
And we've already started to get more of that. We had a small clip, and now it's extended out into the moments before he was put down on the ground, and they're trying to figure out why there was, he was taken off of camera at one point. So we've got all of that in play as well. So
there's so many
that is until the next case catches the eye of the media, and then they will push this to the side, and they'll go on to the next thing.
Well, there's so many civil cases now happening, because we've got the Ahmaud Arbery case, we've the Brionna Taylor case, and then there's the one in Louisville, right?
That is the one in Louisville. That's Brionna Taylor.
That's Brionna. Well, there was another one then. It was the barbecue restaurant owner who was shot, and it was, I think, a mistake, but the body cameras were off. And
that's Brionna Taylor.
That's Brionna Taylor?
Yes, that's Brionna Taylor.
Watching protests for the last week, so
it could have to do with the police captain who was.
Yes, so that's what I'm thinking. Yes.
Okay.
So the police.
On a lighter note, let's don't forget about Joe Exotic. So
yes, Carol got the.
And the fact that they found the forgery.
We just
talked to him.
Which I had no knowledge of. We were actually. When was that? We were actually. I was just enjoying myself, sitting by the water with my grandson, and we were feeding the fish and the ducks, and it was either my wife or my son said, "Oh my God, this will was a forgery, and they proved it. And I was like,
Oh, well,
how? And there's like two separate documents. Document examiners said that this is a forgery, and so I'm thinking,
well, Thomas won't say it's a forgery. He says it's a tracing.
He doesn't determine whether it's a forgery or not.
Because that's intent, kind of.
Because that's intent. He has to detremine intent or not, so he can't do that. So kind of like what you have to do.
Well, when we teach question documents, tracing is in fact a form of forgery.
Yeah.
Because they do have intent to do something.
I would think so, but that's his thing. But yeah, we talked to him today. That was very interesting. And what's going to come into play in that case is whether or not the will even matters, because the power of attorney is how she transferred all the funds. So it's so many different things in that case.
2020 needs to shut up. That's what I need.
Oh, stop saying that. Just stop saying it. Anyway.
It's only June.
Anyway, let's get back to the case at hand. So, I mean, you've given us a little bit of information, but I wanted you to, like you said, you wanted to go really deep into this autopsy. So let's let you go back to that here, what you found and what you think based on what they've said, what you're
I found it, well, first off, Mr. Floyd had significant, and I don't mean just marginal or mild. Note that they use the word severe when they're talking about his atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. That means that when they're examining the vessels of the heart, that they have done a dissection of the heart, they're finding major occlusion, which means blockage in these vessels. Apparently, though they're saying that this is some kind of cardiac related event, I never saw where they were able to demonstrate that he had sustained or suffered, I hate the word suffered, that he had, an MI, myocardial infarction, had occurred within his heart. Now, does that mean that he could not have, he could have very well had some kind of weird rhythm event, and it sent him, because his the uptake in his heart is bad anyway. He didn't necessarily have to have, quote unquote, a classic MI. This brought about his death. Now, another conflicting area in what Dr. Bodden said between what, and he also had cardiomegalia, which means it means exactly. He had a big heart. And as a matter of fact, it weighed about 150 grams more than like a normal sized heart. And that's not the biggest heart I've ever seen. I actually saw a lady that had an 800-gram heart, and it's like the size of a canned ham. But yeah, I mean, and some people just have big organs, but this is hypertension related.
Yes.
He probably had thickening of the ventricular walls, which is something we see. But back to what I was saying between Dr. Bodden's findings and the ME's findings relative to the lungs. Dr. Bodden had mentioned that, if I remember, correct me, Fancy, if I'm wrong, but I think in that clip that thing from the attorney, if I remember correctly, he had stated that the lungs were not congested. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's what
lungs not congested or infected. So for anybody who hasn't read this yet, I mean, we went through a couple of things earlier, but when he gets down to his findings related to cause of death, this is what he says. He said that he died of asphyxia due to neck and back pressure. The pressure on the neck and back interfered with his breathing and blood flow to the brain. There was weight on the back, which we saw. Handcuffs and positioning were contributory factors because they impaired the ability to breathe. He did die at the scene, is what he's saying. There was no other obvious cause of death. The cause of death is consistent with what we see on the video. No other cause of death is present in the autopsy. Later information will not change cause of death, but will be informative. And the toxicology findings are helpful in understanding the circumstances of death, but are not a causing or contributing cause of death.
That's Baden's, right?
That's Bodden. That's what
Bodden. Yeah, and I agree with pretty much everything he said. But one thing I find curious is that the lungs themselves, if I remember correctly, and I might be misremembering, love that word, misremembering, that the Hennepin County ME found those lungs to be congested. Now they are absent. Evidence of infection like pneumonia and that sort of thing. They state that there is nothing there. So that runs parallel to what Dr. Bodden had said. But the lungs are heavy, they're heavy, and he's in respiratory distress. I think that, at least in my estimation, now, how was that brought about? Was it, he does mention the position and how this was an asphyxial. Now, we do have a mechanism that's referred to as positional asphyxia. And that means that an individual is in a compromised position. They can't
Lung volume.
respire,
Yeah.
and they can't expire from their lungs the way they normally would. Let's just say that just for an instant, that they had simply taken Mr. Floyd and placed him on the curb, seated, all right?
Yeah.
He's up here where the air is, all right? Now, he's already a man, by his own admission, that is claustrophobic. He's handcuffed, so he's stressed.
Right.
When you're down here and you're low on the ground, I think that it pretty much stands to reason you can't oxygenate the way you might in that position, as opposed to seated upright, even with your hands behind you. You can still, inhalate and exhalate in that position. If you're face down, and people, try this at home, lay on your stomach, put your hands behind your back and try, or on a hard surface. I wouldn't recommend you go out on the road and do it, but it's on
hard.
a hard surface, it's hard. And particularly if you have somebody on your back, any of us that have brothers or sisters, we know what it's like to be in the midst of what we called a pig pile when we were little. Everybody's going to pig pile, and they jump on top of you, and you hate that. Everybody hates that. But, you get the idea of what that's like, and you're compressed. You're the person on the bottom, and it's hard. It's hard to fill your lungs up with air. Well, all kinds of things can occur as a result of that. But if I remember correctly, there was no signs of pneumonia. I've had a couple of people ask me if the fact that he tested positive for COVID is impactful here. No.
Right, he had it back in March, right?
I'm so tired.
Yeah, that's what they think, and I don't even know. I don't know that he. And again,
he was I think he was just a carrier. Like
carrier,
he didn't actually have it.
He didn't present
with the
symptomology.
symptoms.
Yeah,
there was asymptomatic. Okay. So
and one of the things that one of the major things that we look for, or that they are looking for in these people that do present with full blown COVID it's gonna be a pneumonia. That's
Fluid.
What they're looking for. Yeah. They're looking for these, these highly congested lungs are probably filled with pus and everything else that you see.
Inflammation fluid.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not seeing that, and there's nothing to indicate. But other than, that assessment relative to what Bodden is saying there, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I don't know that anything will be more impactful. I think that it is possible that probably the drug use may have some impact, but it was they're doing this in nanograms per liter, milliliter, I think. Those are negligible amounts of drugs that he's got on board. By my estimation, I'm not a toxicologist, but just looking at that, they're not. It almost looks like he's on the downtick as far as metabolism of these things, particularly the fentanyl and the meth. Now, meth,
an interesting combination.
Well, the thing about it is that sometimes
up or downer?
You're finding some of this meth that's coming in right now that you're buying on the street. Well, that's where you would have to buy. Has fentanyl in it.
Yeah.
And the reason they do that.
And heroin with fentanyl in it too.
Yeah, and the fentanyl is such, if you think meth is bad, and it is, fentanyl has such an addictive quality to it that if they apply that, it's almost like you're begging to get more of it. It's an insidious cycle. I mean, it really is. And he was obviously, I guess, according from a chemical standpoint, toxicological standpoint, there's evidence of this, that he had subjected his body to this. There was THC on board, which is now more prevalent than ever. So at some point in time, he had come in contact probably with cannabinoids. It looks like some of that stuff is synthetic from my reading. He was absent. He was absent any kind of alcohol. There's evidence that he had caffeine in his system. So he probably liked Diet Coke and coffee as much as I do.
Right.
And he had one of the byproducts of nicotine in his system. And I think that even we have evidence of that. I think that what he was trying to purchase
was cigarettes.
Was cigarettes. Yeah, in the store. So we've got, everything seems to kind of line up. And, you know, I don't know, you know, I think that from my perspective, I don't know that it was solely the pressure on the neck. That is a huge contributing factor, because I think that it compromised the blood flow to the brain, even though the brain, I don't think.
He didn't have an infarction in his brain. It was, so the county had said it was a cardiopulmonary arrest from the subdural restraint and neck compression. So the full respiratory system unable to ventilate.
Right.
But that he suffered a heart attack, cardiopulmonary event from that, versus, like we had talked with about Epstein, you know, strangulation and hanging, and if, you know, choking somebody and blocking off their airway that way. I guess I haven't read the full autopsy report, if his hyoid was broken or not, or if that's what they're looking for on the
the hyoid was intact. The strap muscles had, and just so folks understand, you know, most of the time with asphyxial deaths, one of the things that we're looking for is we're looking for petechiae. His sclera were clear, which if you go and look in the mirror, folks at home, it's the white area around your eyes, the surfaces, and there was no soft tissue petechiae down here in the base. His lungs were free of petechiae. They said that the parenchyma, which is the outer surface of the lung, is the only part of the lungs that were what we refer to as pinked up, which is the most the highest portion of the see if I can describe this anatomically. As an individual is laying on their back at the autopsy, when you look at the first area of the lungs, when you're looking down after you remove the breastplate, or the, you know, sternum and the ribs and everything, right here, this area is going to be pinked up, but everything down is kind of a probably kind of a dark mottled color. The best way I can describe it is kind of a light eggplant color, if people can kind of envision that. But some of that can be due to position in the tray after you've been in the morgue and blood has settled. So that's why it's so important when you do these histological exams. There's a lot of stuff you can see microscopically that would only present in life or in a perimortem state, which is that kind of weird state that you float in between antemortem, which is prior to death, and postmortem. You have a state called perimortem, and it's like when you're in the throes of death. You know, some of those things kind of register microscopically. So the histological exam is not showing any evidence of that. I would like to see with Dr. Bodden, I think that I would really like to see what his histological examination is. Like, what does he see when he looks at the slides? Because that's part of what forensic pathologists do. It's not just looking at the gross dissection.
Right, because the respiratory system is described as the right and left lungs weigh 1085 and 1015 grams respectively.
That's very heavy.
Right. The external surfaces are pink only on the most anterior aspects, as you said, and deep red purple in all other areas. The pulmonary parenchyma, is that what you said? Parenchyma is diffusely congested and edematous. EDEM. Edematous. Thank you. I can try and sound out a lot of things, but man, some of these words. It says no mass lesions or areas of consolidation are present. The pulmonary vascular tree is free of thrombosis, and the tracheobronchial tree is free of blood, edema, fluid, or foreign material. So they are saying that that is diffusely congested and whatever that other thing is. But I mean, but then that goes against what Bowden said, is that there was no congestion, right? So that's where the
and that's, for me, I guess that Dr. Bowden, and along with whomever else has an explanation for that. When and lungs are kind of an important thing here.
Yeah. That's what
they are, as is the brain. And Fancy, if you would not mind, I don't know if I can get up on my phone right now, but I think I had it. But if you go to the nervous system heading, and the what's the gross examination, not the, hang on, let me see if I can find it.
No, I've got it here. I've got it.
I was curious because I don't remember them talking about hang on.
So what was it I'm looking for?
I was looking for the brain.
Cranial.
Hold on, let's see here.
Respiratory system, body cavities, neck,
body cavities.
Okay, I got it right here. It's under head. Okay, the brain weighs 1380. And the ventricles are normal in size, basal ganglia. No skull fractures.
Right.
And he's saying, with the brain, one of the things that we would expect with this kind of anoxia that takes place, if you've got the carotid, compromised in some way, one of the things that I kind of would see is that you might see some kind of cerebral swelling. But since this happens so quickly, it's not like somebody that's sitting on a vent in ICU where their brain is and they have to do burr holes and alleviate pressure. This is a very quick event, so I don't know that you could appreciate anything in the brain that quickly, that happened. Because how long? What are we estimating here as far as I think that I'd like to know, and I didn't time it. When did Mr. Floyd go silent on that tape? From the moment that they started taping, and just because they were taping at that moment doesn't mean that something wasn't going on
before then. That's why he was quiet for like 3 minutes
at the end of the end when the thing cut off. Yeah, because I didn't know, how long he had, how any of this was precipitated. How long had he been in this kind of compromised position? Because look, anybody, people a lot smarter than me, or even, they're going to say time is everything in this event. How much pressure are you being applied? How much pressure and how much time is passing as a result of your vasculature being compromised at that point in time? So how long has this kind of been clamped down? That's what you're saying killed him. How long did it take? What are you actually saying is the mechanism here? And, run through this with me and just let me know, because it's going to be explained. Listen, to Biden's benefit, he states precisely what he believes as far as the cause of death here, the causation of the death. When you read the Hennepin report, it's got this laundry list on the front end, and it's very non-specific. I mean, you really have to read this thing to try to understand what is it that they're saying actually caused Mr. Floyd to pass away. And, what is it about this? It's not tightened down. And I'm not saying that maybe they do all of their report. Maybe this particular physician does all of their reports this way. I don't know, but you don't have it's right. That's the thing about gunshot wounds and specific trauma. You say, okay, they sustained, massive trauma to the head as a result of a gunshot wound. We know what the cause of death is. Here,
Right.
it's so multi-layered. And listen, there's a lot to be said about keeping things simple and being very exacting.
Mhm.
And this is science. We need exactitude here. What are you talking about? Tell us what you're talking about, because this is what it comes down to. We can read through this report all we want. We can have other people that are scientifically inclined. We can have medical experts. But at the end of the day, it ain't going to be medical experts sitting in that jury box.
Nah.
Well, right. They have to explain it in a way that a jury can understand it in simplistic terms.
Yep.
Able to get it across to them, repeat it in their head in a simple way. Because if you talk like a textbook at them, they're zoning out. They're not understanding a single thing. Especially in this case, there's too much other stuff coming into play.
Yeah.
And for our listeners, I want you to know, we're not saying that Mr. Floyd had any role in how he died. This is not a race thing. This is not, his life thing. This is just on a pure medical basis. This is what happened in his body.
Right.
And what the medical experts are going to have to kind of consensus and become their opinion on it and be able to testify on that. And versus we know that if Mr. Floyd had not come into contact with the police that day, would he have died at that minute?
And at the end of the day, that's what this all comes down to, and I think that, there are these little things, and I've encountered it throughout my career that, you kind of sit back. I'm going to wax philosophical here for a second, but you sit back and you really consider, if you turned left or you turned right, things would have been different. And in this set of circumstances, you had a group of police officers, and one in particular that I can see on tape that is, and I teach at Police Academy. All right. I don't teach restraint and all that stuff. I teach death investigation, but they are taught how to properly restrain somebody. Okay.
Right.
I've never ever seen anybody say, you should take your knee and put it on somebody's neck.
Well, we've been told specifically by trainers and things like that is exactly what they are taught not to do. Yeah. It's supposed to be, if they do that, it's on the lower back end or the mid back, nowhere near
the head. No, that's just not something.
Now, I've got a question here that I don't know if this has anything to do with it. I don't even know what it means, why they have it in here. But they said the finding of sickled appearing cells in many of the autopsy tissue sections prompted the hemoglobin S quantitative reported above. This quantitative result is indicative of sickle cell trait. Red blood cells in individuals with sickle cell trait are known to sickle as a post-mortem artifact. So what would that even mean?
Yeah,
why would they even
Colleen
include
address
that?
Yeah.
So if you look at a histological slide of red blood cells in a normal healthy adult, there's circular little red dots, pink dots. Yeah. In sickle cell anemia, the cells literally are sickled in a little half moon shape, which means that they don't carry oxygen effectively to the tissues. And so what happens is there will be like a buildup of these cells in tissues causing extreme pain, and it's only in African American populations. Sure. And it is unfortunately something that is way too common, and there's not a cure for. It's just a chronic lifelong condition they have to deal with. And so we don't know his medical history and what he's dealt with. Potentially he's had this, and maybe that's why he takes drugs or took drugs to deal with the pain that he suffered from that. We don't know. We don't know his social background history
with sickle cell.
Right, it's very painful.
It can also, this is another important point. Sickle cell can also terribly affect your respiratory system.
Yep. Which is what I was asking.
Yeah. And I don't know that was the case.
It could have. We
would have to assess that. And again, I think that
factors
that
came into
he would
play.
have seen if there was some kind of impactful, I'm talking about from Hennepin County standpoint,
Right.
if there was some kind of impact on the lung tissue when he's looking at that lung tissue histologically, you don't see it grossly. You have to look at it under the scope. There would be certain things that pathologists are trained to pick up on within the strata of the tissue of the lung. Did that compromise his ability to process oxygen in any way whatsoever?
Yeah.
And I think that it would be important to go back and get kind of a medical
history.
social history on him
Yep.
to find out, was he did he self-medicate, or had he ever been treated at some point in time? Because that's important information to know. I can guarantee you, again, this is a point that the defense is going to bring up.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, the defense will bring this up because they'll say, well, I've got an expert in sickle cell. I'm going to put him on the stand, and he's going to talk about what these people go through and what a horrible time they have with it and how it compromises the system. And they'll bring these people in. The question is going to be asked, and I don't know how sufficiently it'll be answered, but that's just, I've seen enough of these things now to know that that's a question that's going to be asked. You know, you can.
No, absolutely. That's why I was asking it, because I knew that would be something the defense is going to try and use as a comorbidity, you know, like, and that it would play into the factor of whether or not this was straight just caused by what the officer himself did, Chauvin did, or if it was together, and if that is together, then it could have been a lesser, you know, it wasn't intentional, it wasn't this, it wasn't that, you know. So now that's where you're getting into what Colleen, you were saying earlier, of would they end up, you know, going and making a deal on something based on that,
right know? And I think that it will, I mean, I think that it also could work to the DA's factor in that, because there's going to be the conversation about drug use. It's going to come up. It's going to come up about his social history. And so it could play into that, like he had these chronic conditions that he was unable to treat, and maybe in this community there's, you know, there's a whole crap ton of issues that are going to result from that.
Yeah, but there will be. And
but I guess that's one of the conversations that I really haven't been hearing from any is about the sickle cell and about.
I don't think anybody knows.
Well, I don't think that most people have
looked at that yet.
To read the autopsy report at this point. I think that as time goes by, they will. And I gotta say, I mean, I don't envy the forensic pathologist that's involved in this case, because I know that I know what's waiting down they're going to be impugned.
Yeah. And
you know, you just kind of have to weather these storms and know that it will get better, you know, over a period of time. You know, I think back to all the way back to in 2013 when I did Trayvon Martin, and if you get a chance, he's kind of an interesting guy. Look up the pathologist that was involved in that case. His name is Rao, R-O-A, and he wound up quitting and suing the county as a result of, you know, everything that was going on with that case. And some people didn't agree with his findings because it was kind of a straightforward case. But when you get all of the static that's involved with it, you know, unlike cops, forensic pathologists kind of live on an island in their little offices, and then they go downstairs, they go to the morgue, they look at a microscope. But when you put them in these positions, it's an interesting dynamic. A great example of this, and I don't want to go too far afield, but going all the way back to the O.J. Simpson case, if you will pay close attention to the early stages of that trial, when they did pre-trial, there was a forensic pathologist, and you can see his name on Nicole Brown Simpson's report as well as on Von Goldman's. That forensic pathologist, I think his name was Gold, if I'm not mistaken. He did the autopsy. I met him in St. Louis right before the O.J. Simpson case actually happened years ago.
That's pretty cool.
At St. Louis University School of Medicine. I was at a conference, And I was fascinated by the fact that I was seated next to an LA County pathologist, and there was a couple from Dallas and me that was directly across the table. We were talking shop. And I was like, well, how many cases a day do you work when you're on duty? And he never looked at me. He sat there, and his hands kind of trembled as he was eating.
Right.
And the reason I remember that is that we were using like really nice cutlery, and it was china.
Oh, so it's.
And he was kind of shaking like this. And I said, how many cases do you do in one day? He said, generally 13. 13 autopsies in one day. And that can run the gamut from a detailed multi-gunshot wound case to a complicated natural disease to some kind of decomposed suicide that you can't hang your hat on anything. And he would see all this, and he's having to live in this bubble and because forensic pathologists, contrary to what you see on TV, don't go to scenes. That information is coming in from the field, from the investigators, or from the hospital. He never testified in the trial. They had to get the chief medical examiner to come in and actually testify. It was that much pressure on this guy. And the chief medical examiner, and forgive me, I can't remember this guy's name. He's got a name that's about this long. And I would not even, I'd butcher it if I tried it. Look it up. You don't, I tell all my students, assume I'm lying to you. Look it up yourself. He never testified in that trial. And I think a lot of it had to do, and particularly back then we didn't have the internet. The pressure. Can you imagine the pressure that's being exerted
these high-profile
on this
cases?
Guy. Yeah, and not to mention all the other cases that he's having to deal with that nobody ever hears about. And it's these two cases that are going to be attached to his name forever and ever. Amen. So you never know what's going to happen on that particular day when you're on duty, and this event is going to take place, and you're going to wind up having to tell this tale maybe years and years after the fact, and everything else that you've ever done is not going to matter. It's not going to matter. It's going to be
I still feel bad for the coroner, for Kaylee Anthony.
Yeah.
Like, she was crucified on that stand about it. And she's like, a child should not have duct tape across their mouth when they die. Shouldn't have it. She said, that's why I ruled it a homicide. And be like, well, you don't know. And so I felt like that was one of those cases where having somebody come and testify to situations like that where there's less information and the decomposing, and we'll have to like talk to you on another episode, have you on again about Scott Peterson, because I have a lot of
well, that's okay. I've actually I'm run out of steam, guys. So
I know exactly.
But I feel like that we've covered a lot of good territory. I don't know that. I hope that I've been able to answer the questions that you guys have, and
I mean, is there anything else that you can think of that you would want to impart before leaving on this case? You know,
I would advise anybody that's actually interested in true crime to maintain a level head throughout this. Don't allow your emotions to get wrapped up, because science and emotions are a dangerous mix. You have to remain stalwart and focused on what the evidence is that you have before you, and move forward. Oh, can I say one other thing before I go? This has nothing to do with this. I don't know who in the hell it was that released the autopsy report on Kobe Bryant and his daughter.
Oh,
that'll be permanently banned, because that has no weight. I had somebody came on my thread the other day that's in some true crime group, and they had a link for it. And I'm thinking, what purpose does this serve? Why do you need to do this? And it's horrible, absolutely horrible. Why, just because it's there, why do you want to stick it out there? And in a true crime group, because the last I checked, it ain't a crime. They had a crash and they died. And so, I don't know. That's kind of a sad commentary in the world that we live in. It really is. And it's
I think people have a thirst for information, but there's some things that that they passed away in a helicopter crash.
Yeah, I mean, how much data do you need?
Right.
You would be surprised on some of the things that we've worked on and some of the cases and some of the different things that we've worked on, different things.
There's like that one website, like Morbid and Macabre, like, and I like some of their stuff, but there are some stuff where they've got, full on pictures that the world does not need to see, that I'm sure the family members do not want out there.
Well, not even that. I mean, just the fascination that some people have with certain weird parts of things and how misconstrued the information gets because they don't know what the hell they're talking about. For instance, saying something along the lines of I'm going to count that as one surgery when it's 7 because it's the exact same surgery. I don't know. We've heard something crazy like that.
Wow,
Colleen,
where in the world did you ever hear that?
Oh, we got war stories.
I'm sure he knows.
I know. All right, ladies. Thank you to all of your listeners and all of your fans. Thank you for having me on.
We love having you on. You're one of our favorite guests, and we will have you back as many times as you will come and speak with us.
Just give me a call. I'm always hanging out. Seems like I'm spending a lot of time in front of the camera right now, and I am.
I know.
So, but that's okay. That means that I have something of value to say. But
the wisdom out there.
I really hope that everybody will just focus on the science in this. That's the only thing that I can really impart. Find peace in your life. Get off the damn internet. It's one of the worst things, right? And you know what? I promised myself, I told my wife tonight, I promised myself that today and tomorrow we're going to be completely internet free days. And then this autopsy report drops. And I get called late last night by Law and Crime, and there's a big interview coming out that I've conducted with Aaron Keller from Law and Crime, where I talk about the autopsy report itself. And so that's something that had to be done, but it is what it is. And so tomorrow I'm not getting on social media. So.
I know, and I was one of the first ones in the inbox too. I was like, hey, I need you. This has got to happen right now. Like,
but you spend some good time with your grandson.
Have a good
one.
I will. Some family
Looking
time.
Forward to it. You guys take care. God bless.
Night.
Take care,
Good
guys.
Night.
You
Talk
too.
to you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh my God.
I love our interviews with him. They're so long, but I don't even care.
Long, but they're so good.
He gave I'm fascinated about the way he talked about the sickle cell because nobody's talking about that.
That's why I brought it up.
That's unique, and no one's gonna fucking talk about it.
Why do you think I brought it up? Why do you think I brought it up? Why do you think I brought it up? I ain't stupid.
Especially like we got me on the nursing side. I can tell you is simple what is happening, and then Joseph's like, yeah, that can impact their oxygenation levels.
I was like, I know what sickle cell anemia is. I know what it causes. Why is no one speaking about this?
Well, especially in that it plays into his social factors. If he's in chronic pain and he's using drugs, and that's why he was on, using street drugs. Maybe in Minnesota, he didn't have insurance. Maybe he couldn't afford the medications or the hospital inpatient stays. That's a whole social factor. And so I think that would be an interesting play. And I love our talks with him.
I love Joseph. I love him.
Talk about OJ in this episode.
Right. No, I can't wait to get into the Delphi murders with him. I am super, 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 super.
Well, you had me write these questions, and now I'm all excited for Scott Peterson because the coffin birth is one of my favorite topics on this case. And that how there was some string tied around Connor's neck and wrist, and what happened? What was that? Was he born? What happened? I have questions that are medical examiner related. So, but that was they're always so long, but they're always so good. It's never like it's dragging its feet, and I want to end it. It's always
right. I always just feel bad for him because he's like, I'm like
2 hours
God,
later.
I could keep you here for 3 hours and still not get through this shit. Like. Right. I could have gone through this, and I think I'm going to ask him what I'm going to ask him to do for our listeners, and I'm going to see if I can get this done, guys. Now I can't promise this. But what I'm going to ask him to do is maybe if he will go through this 20-page autopsy and make his own little notes for you guys, like that we can put into our Patreon account for our members. So I will see what I can get done. Cross my fingers. I'm sure he will do that for us, but I'm hoping.
He's a busy guy, so we
He's
can't
a busy
promise
guy.
anything.
I can't promise it, but that's what I'm looking for to do in our Patreon account. So that will be something that keep an eye out for us announcing whether or not we get him, our very good friend, to do that. So
I love our experts. They're so great.
our experts are amazing.
They all bring something unique to the table. Like we talked with Carol Baskin, you know, you guys, you heard us talk about the handwriting and the tracing. You know, we talked with Cheryl about law enforcement, talked to Joseph about the medical side. We're going to be talking to Stephen David Lampley about the aftermath here in the protests and riots and what's happening on that sense. So we try to bring you a little bit of everything. So, because each media source you might read, listen to, everybody has their own agenda. Yeah. And they're going to tell you things differently from either side, whether you're looking at it from a political standpoint, a social standpoint, crime standpoint. So we try to give you guys, you know, some feelings from us, but we try to give it very objectively on each.
Our standpoint is the standpoint of truth, regardless of what that truth might be. Yeah. So that's what we focus on here. And if we cover all the bases with all the experts and we talk to everybody, then the idea there, you know, is, and just because you don't see a lot of, you know, you see Cheryl on here, you see Stephen David Lampley, you'll see Joseph Scott Morgan, you're going to hear from maybe Kirk Nurmi, who's you know, a retired lawyer now, all of it that served on the Jodi Arias cases and everything, you know, all those different people, they bring a different perspective. But just because you don't see others, we have tons and tons of other experts that we speak to all the time, because to bring the information that we bring forward, because we are so interested in making sure that you guys get the 100% truth as much as we can give you.
Thanks so much for tuning in and dishing true crime with the Good Wives and Murder by Design. Don't forget to join our Patreon member club to get exclusive mini episodes, inside documents and pictures from the case, live YouTube discussions, our exclusive discussion group on Facebook, and get some amazing Good Wives merchandise.
And follow us on Twitter and Instagram at True Crime Wives. And for more inside information, check out our podcast, The Good Wives Guide to True Crime, on any of your favorite podcast players.
Have a good one from The Good Wives, serving up true crime one dish at a time.